Chapter 30.
The hospital room was still dark, but the sunlight had managed to break through the clouds enough to clothe the room in a twilight. Through the half-open door, he heard nurses walking past, medicine carts traveling through the hallway on squeaky wheels, and the occasional conversational fragment. He lay with his eyes closed, focused on his breathing. They had given him another sedative after Carolyn left. "Something to help you sleep," the nurse had said. Sleep? Shit, the stuff had knocked him flat. He didn't so much sleep as pass out. The next time he opened his eyes, the sunlight had shifted. A look at the clock on the wall told him it was already 1500. Alan would be nearly out of school now. Trey felt his heart rate rise. He closed his eyes again and imagined Alan's happy face. His heart rate slowed a bit. Carolyn would pick him up. Carolyn would walk or drive him home. It would all be okay. Trey sighed. The thing at his bedside, the ghoul dressed in the cream-colored clothes of the ice cream man. But hadn't there been something else? Something familiar? The thing had rasped. Trey felt something click in his mind. Raspy voice, the long nose, the eyes. They had been that yellow and then turned green. Closet man green. Something was so... "You sleeping, Trey?" He didn't bother opening his eyes, but smiled. "I've been lying here for hours waiting for you to show up." "Uh-huh," Kincaid said. Trey opened his eyes and watched as she entered the room. "I wanted to make sure we weren't going to need the rubber room." "Oh," he growled. "You tell that to all crazy people?" "Only the ones that need to hear it." "Quack," he said. Kincaid stared at him, a mischievous grin on her face. It was infectious. "So what do you have to say for yourself?" She bent down and looked at his chart. "Nothing serious. Been getting updates on you from the nurses every couple of hours. They say you slept like a baby." "Slept? Fuck," he whispered. More like they kicked my head in. What the fuck was that shit? "Just something to keep my favorite psycho asleep until I got here." "Ah," Trey said. "So your bedside manner is only at your convenience." She put the clipboard down, her smile fading a bit. "You aren't my only patient, Trey. Just the only patient I'm currently interested in." "Quack," he growled. Kincaid pulled over a chair and sat down beside him. "They've cleared your concussion. You're out of the woods." "Just like that?" She nodded. "Just like that. Last time the nurse peered in your eyes and asked you your name, you actually passed the test." She licked her lips. "Now let's talk about the hard stuff." He sighed. "You're going to commit me." The grin on her face disappeared. She sucked in a breath. "Trey, you checked yourself in. Even though you're in the hospital ward, that doesn't really mean much. You asked me to more or less admit you for treatment, and that's what we're doing." Trey said nothing. "Do you remember the last time we did this?" "Yes," Trey said, his voice flat. "You asked me to admit myself, and I did." She nodded. "And I let you out again, didn't I?" He said nothing. "Last time you'd hurt yourself. You'd hurt your wife." She paused. "Do you want to do that again?" "Fuck no," Trey said at once, his voice loud in the quiet room. Kincaid didn't flinch, but her smile returned. "Good. Now, do you have any questions?" "Just until the delusions pass?" She nodded, her smile growing sad. "Yes, once we're sure you're not going to have any more hallucinations, I'll kick your ass out of here." She chuckled. "I like my favorite psycho being on the streets. It's good for my reputation." "Uh-huh." "Trey, there's someone I would like to bring in on your treatment." She paused again, staring into his eyes, unblinking. "Is that okay?" "Who?" "You'll meet him tomorrow if you agree. I think you'll like him." "Okay," he said. "Guess I'm going to have to sign something?" She shrugged. "Actually, I'm going to have Carolyn sign something, although it's really just a formality. I wanted to get your consent, though. Don't want you wasting anybody's time by being more a pain in the ass than you already are." He smiled. "Okay, fine. I gave you my verbal consent to bring in someone else to fuck with my brain." Good, she said with a laugh. The more quacks, the better, right? The smile was getting to him again. His lips turned upward of their own accord. Bring in a fucking flock of geese if you think it's going to help. Sure, I will, believe me. Now, she said, and pulled a notebook from her valise. Can you talk to me about your visitor? He shivered and turned away from her toward the side of the bed where the thing had been. What do you want to know? Can you describe him to me? Trey shrugged and looked back at her. It was the ice cream man again, but... But what? What did he say to you? That voice, the rasping voice, the green eyes.
You dirty little boy. You're coming back with me, or I'll split you in half like I should have.
The shiver racked his entire body. The voice echoed in his brain. He told me he was going to take me back. She furrowed a brow. Back? He was going to take you back? Where? She asked. I don't know, he whispered. She nodded and scribbled in the notebook. She dropped it to her knees, her hands clasped atop it. You remembered something this time, didn't you? Yes, he said. The voice, it was... I've heard it before. He looked away from her again, staring at the half-open door. I just can't remember where, Trey whispered. Shh. It's okay, Trey. She clucked her tongue. Do you remember who you were talking to last time you had an incident? He shook his head. She picked up the notebook, thumbed through the pages until she encountered a sticky note. According to Carolyn, you said, you leave him the fuck alone. She looked up at him. Does that mean anything to you? Trey thought for a moment. Who the hell had he been talking to? That voice, the rasp. I was telling him to leave Alan alone. She inched forward in the chair, leaning toward him. Who were you telling, Trey? Who? The man, he whispered. A figure, tall, dressed in jeans that smelled like dirt and oil, a soiled denim jacket covering broad shoulders, dirt-encrusted work boots, a belt swinging from one hand, frantic green eyes staring with malevolence. The sound of snapping fingers caught his attention, and he looked over at her. Still with me? She asked, her face set in a frown, brows furrowed. Still with me, Trey? He swallowed hard. How long this time? She shrugged. About a minute. What did you see? The man. His vision began to blur. Stay with me, Trey, she whispered. His vision snapped back, the world once again solidifying around him. I need you to take some deep breaths, okay? Deep breath. She pulled in a lung full of air and held it. As he watched her, he found himself doing the same. She exhaled slowly through her teeth, Trey following suit. Good, she said. Keep doing that for a moment, okay? Trey nodded. Now close your eyes. The room disappeared behind his lids. He heard her shift in her chair, but continued the breathing. The world spun a little and then righted itself. Alan's face floated across his mind. Now, she said, can you picture the man? Alan's face shattered into thousands of pieces, a long nose shoving its way through the boy's smile, long teeth crunching through his cheeks. Trey opened his eyes and sat up in bed, screaming.
Chapter 31.
The final bell rang. The 20 children in the room had been shifting in their seats the last 10 minutes. Even as the teacher read aloud from their history text, Alan knew none of the class was listening. All he'd heard at lunch that day was about the ice cream man. Kids talking about how nice he was, how he helped them count out the change, and always had something to recommend. Alan said nothing while his classmates blathered on about him. When they asked why he hadn't met the ice cream man, Alan had only shrugged. He didn't want to tell them. It was at recess, though, when the day had gotten bad. He was playing on the monkey bars, throwing one hand in front of the other, swinging across them in the darkened afternoon when Jimmy Keel walked over with his 3 friends. The rest of the children knew they were the bullies, the ones who would trip you when you were late to class, or steal your lunch. They were bigger, mean, Jimmy was the largest of the group, and by far the worst. "Hey, freak," Keel called to him as Alan stepped off the monkey bars. Alan said nothing, ignoring him and going to the other end to start again. "Hey, freak, I'm talking to you," Keel said from behind him. Alan continued to say nothing. He just put one hand in front of the other, swinging from one metal bar to the next. "Your dad is shithouse nuts," Keel growled. Alan dropped from the monkey bars, landing on his feet beneath the horizontal metal ladder. A sudden flush of heat had filled him. His skin had become volcanic, cheeks burning with... what? Rage? Embarrassment? He turned, listening to Keel's laughter. The other three boys with him looked at one another, giggling. "What did you say?" Alan asked in his high-pitched voice. Keel stepped forward with slow, deliberate steps. His savage smile displayed all of his ivory teeth. "I said your dad is shithouse nuts." Keel advanced a few more steps until he stood just in front of Alan, his face staring down into Alan's flushed face. "What do you say to that?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Alan said. Alan tried to step around Keel, but the boy moved back in front of him. "My brother saw your old man yesterday, freak," Keel chuckled. "Said your old man freaked out and then went face first into the fucking pavement." The boy spat into the dirt right next to Alan's shoe. "Your dad's afraid of the ice cream man, you wuss," Keel said. Alan tried to step around him again. Keel matched the move. "Leave me alone," Alan whispered. "Ah, little sissy boy, you afraid of the ice cream man too?" The other three boys behind Keel giggled again. Jimmy turned back to them, laughing. "See," he said to them, "he's afraid too." Jimmy turned back to Alan, bending down so his foul breath shoved into Alan's face. "A crazy little pussy just like your dad." The lava of rage that had been building in his stomach overflowed. Alan's left leg shot up in a soccer kick that connected with Keel's balls. Keel let out a whimpering breath and fell to his knees. The three boys behind him all winced, their faces surprised O's. The memory of his father laying on the pavement, his mother kneeling over his prone form, and the ice cream man standing above them filled his mind. A single tear welled up in his eye, and he wiped it away. "Don't you ever talk about my dad that way again," Alan whispered. He walked past Jimmy's kneeling form. Keel's bully buddies moved out of his way to let him pass. "I'm going to get you for that," Keel shrieked from behind him. Alan said nothing. He didn't turn around. He just continued walking toward the swings where he knew Mrs. Sinclair would be. The rest of the afternoon, the children whispered. They wouldn't talk to him. Some looked at him with a newfound reverence. Others practically crossed themselves. He knew what they were thinking. He was a dead man. Jimmy Keel and his friends would catch him. Not today, since his mother was coming to pick him up. But one day, soon, they'd catch him, and they'd beat him up. When the school bell sounded, Alan stuffed his small notebook in his backpack and pulled it up. The teacher was babbling something, but Alan didn't pay attention. He made his way through the doors and into the hallway. Sure enough, Keel and his boys were standing at the wall near the school exit. The four of them glowered at him as he passed, but said nothing. He knew why, too. The assistant principal, Mr. Herman, was within earshot. Alan didn't bother making eye contact with them. He knew he'd pay for what he did, but not today. Alan walked through the school doors while the smaller kids ran past him. The ice cream van's cheery, loud bells rang across the playground. A crowd had already gathered in front of the white van. Alan walked toward the parking lot and stopped. His mother wasn't there yet. He turned and stared back toward the ice cream van. Even through the trees, he could make out the ice cream man's head bobbing as he exchanged treats for the pocket money. "You're fucking dead," a voice from behind him said. Startled, Alan turned. Jimmy Keel stood alone, his feet on the parking lot's cement curb, his grim face highlighting the hate in his eyes. Alan felt a pang of fear, and then remembered what the boy had said about his father. "Not today," Alan whispered. Keel grinned. "No," he said, "not today, but I'll get you, you little shit." Keel walked past him, purposely bumping him hard with his elbow. Alan's ribs screamed in pain, but he forced himself to stay quiet. I'm going to see the ice cream man, he said. He turned around and glared at Alan. I'm not a pussy like your daddy. He smiled at Alan, his eyes still filled with that glittering rage. He flipped Alan off and then made his way toward the van. Alan watched the boy as he made his way toward the already dwindling crowd. The ice cream man had made short work of the crowd today, and most of the children had left, heading home. Jimmy Keel's tall, bulky form strutted through the copse of trees. "Alan!" a voice yelled behind him. He turned. His mother's car was behind him now, parked in the space. "You ready?" He took one look back and watched Jimmy Keel standing at the edge of the ice cream van, staring into it. "Yeah, Mom," he said and turned back toward her. She looked like she'd had a rough day. He felt like crying. She looked a little lost, a little scared. He choked back the feeling and forced himself to smile. Daddy isn't here to make her smile, he thought, so it's my job now.
Chapter 32.
Dinner was blessedly short. Mommy took Alan to Chipotle, where they each had a burrito, although Alan didn't feel much like eating. The worried look on her face and the way her eyes didn't make contact with his told him everything he needed to know. But Mommy had still tried to talk to him, as best she could. In as few words as possible, he related his day, leaving out the hallway whispers and the confrontation with Jimmy Keel. She didn't need to know any of that. When he asked her how her day was, her face grew pale. "It was a day," she told him. "Your daddy said he loves you." Ellen smiled at that. "Is Daddy okay?" Mommy nodded. "Dr. Kincaid is taking care of him. They've got his broken arm all fixed up and he's sleeping a lot." Although he didn't say it, Ellen knew what that meant. Daddy was sleeping a lot because they were making him sleep. He frowned. Daddy had looked so lost in the hospital, lost and in pain. Ellen had wiped at his eyes, but said nothing. Sitting in the living room with his math book in front of him, Alan read the word problem again and again, but none of it made sense. His mother sat on the couch, a book splayed open on her lap. He didn't think she was really reading either. "Mommy?" he asked. She looked up from the book. "Yes, dear?" "When can I see Daddy?" Her face froze and then slowly relaxed. "Daddy will let us know." Alan nodded. "Is it bad?" he asked. Mommy said nothing for a moment. She broke eye contact with him, staring down again at the book in her lap. Alan felt a wave of depression. "Is it as bad as last time?" She didn't look up. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just don't know." A tear welled up and slid down her face. "Mommy?" She wiped away the tear and looked at him. "It's going to be okay. Daddy will be back, right?" A reluctant smile spread across her face. "Yes, honey, Daddy will be back." Alan nodded to her. He let the conversation drop and stared back down into his book. "Alan," she said after a few minutes. "Yes, Mommy?" She cleared her throat. "I want you to stay away from the ice cream man." The shiver in her voice caught his attention. He frowned at her. "I will, Mommy. I don't like him." "Good," she said, staring back into her book. "Now finish your homework, kiddo. It's getting late." Alan stared back down at the numbers on the page. The ice cream man. He looked up at his mother, opened his mouth, and then closed it. The whispers. The eyes. Should he tell her? He looked back down at the page, feeling his heart race. It wasn't real. No more real than the closet man. Mommy didn't need to hear about the whispers. She didn't need to know about the eyes. The pencil moved on the notebook next to the book as he scrawled answers, showing his work, as always. 10 more math problems, and then he could... What? Go to sleep? Read more Harry Potter? He looked up at Mommy again. She was staring into her book, but her eyes weren't moving across the page. As fast as he could, Alan ran through the problems. His pencil raced down the page. As he wrote the answer to the last homework problem, he put the pencil down and took a deep breath. "I'm done, Mommy," he said in a whisper. She looked up from the book. What, honey? I'm done. That's my boy, she said. Why don't you go and get ready for bed? His heart beat faster in his chest. You'll come tuck me in. Of course, she said with a smile. Alan returned it. Okay, he said. He closed the book and shoved it into his pack. With a yawn, he carried the pack to the front door and hung it from the credenza hook. He turned to the dark stairway. He reached for the light switch.
Alan,
a voice whispered in his mind. Alan closed his eyes.
Alan,
it whispered again.
I'm waiting for you.
Alan flicked the light switch and took a deep breath. He opened his eyes. The stairwell was lit. The shadows and darkness had retreated. With a shuddering exhale, he trudged up the stairs and into the hallway. He walked forward and then stopped. His parents' bedroom was to his left, the open door leaving a gaping rectangle of darkness. Won't be there if I don't look, he whispered. He took another deep breath and walked past the bedroom without glancing inside. With the hall light, the bathroom light, and that of his bedroom, few shadows remained. He brushed his teeth and made his way back to his room. He left the door open as he undressed and put on his pajamas. He turned on his lamp and then turned off the overhead light. As he crawled between the sheets, he heard the sound of his mother's footsteps on the stairs. He pulled the blankets up to his neck and stared at the ceiling. Alan, she called from the hallway with a laugh. Did you have to turn on every light in the house? Alan blushed as she entered the room. Sorry, Mommy. Forgot to turn them off, he lied. She nodded to him. She sat on the edge of his bed and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. You going to sleep now? He nodded. I'm tired. So am I, she said with a yawn. Get some sleep, kiddo. I'll take you to school tomorrow, okay? Yes, Mommy, Alan said. She smiled at him. Good night, baby. She kissed his cheek, rose from the bed, and headed for the door. Mommy? She stopped and turned, her brows raised. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Good night. She smiled at him and walked out of the bedroom. The lights in the hallway went out. He took a deep breath and then snapped off the lamp. The room instantly fell into darkness. Alan lay on his back, the covers up to his neck, and closed his eyes. You afraid of the ice cream man, too? Jimmy Keel's hateful voice whispered in his mind. Yes, Alan whispered. I am.
You should be,
a rasping voice answered back. Alan opened his eyes and stared around the room, but nothing was there. No yellow eyes staring back at him, no menacing silhouette in the darkness. He took in a shuddering breath, closed his eyes, and tried to keep the whispers at bay.